morning, everyone. Welcome. I'd like to begin with a prayer. Let us please close the eyes. For a moment, let us turn our concentration to the movement of our breath. And calmly watch. Reminding ourselves of the fundamental teaching of our practice. That this breath is the manifestation of divinity. God is breathing within us. Feel that presence of God in every breath. Let's begin chanting the sacred mantra Om 3 times together. Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Gurudev Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. I bow to God. I bow to our Gurudev Paramahamsa Hariharananda, to our Guruji Paramahamsa Pragyanananda. I bow to our exalted lineage of realized masters, to all saints and sages, divine incarnations of all times and places, and I humbly bow to the living presence of God within you all. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. I humbly pray that the masters will use me as their instrument and guide this talk. Om, Om, Om. Amen. Thank you. Well, good morning, all. So I thought maybe I'd start today with reading a prayer. This is kind of a interesting prayer. It's a song, really, that I love very deeply. It's Joyful, Joyful. It's lyrics were put to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, and the words are really beautiful and heart-touching. I won't sing it for you. I'll spare you that. But I think most of you know the lyrics, or the melody. So the words are very beautiful. Joyful, joyful, we adore thee, God of glory, Lord of love. Hearts unfold like flowers before thee, opening to the sun above. Melt the clouds of sin and sadness, drive the dark of doubt away. Giver of immortal gladness, fill us with the light of day. All thy works with joy surround thee. Earth and heaven reflect thy rays. Stars and angels sing around thee, center of unbroken praise. Field and forest, vale and mountain, flowery meadow, flashing sea, singing bird and flowering fountain, call us to rejoice in thee. Thou art giving and forgiving, ever blessing, ever blessed, wellspring of the joy of living, ocean depth of happy rest. Thou, our Father, Christ, our brother, all who live in love are thine. Teach us how to love each other. Lift us to the joy divine. Mortals join the happy chorus, which the morning stars began. Father love is reigning over us. Brother love binds man to man. Ever singing, march, march we onward, victors in the midst of strife. Joyful music leads us sunward in the triumph song of life. This is so beautiful because it keeps speaking, coming back to love. And Eckhart Tolle, in his book, I think The New Earth, says something really quite profound that's also been spoken of, as I understand, by Adi Shankacharya, about kind of the mystery of words. And he says words have the power to hypnotize us, saying that because we put a label on something, we think we know what it is, but often that is not the case. We know that we have concrete words and abstract words. A concrete word is something that we can experience with the sentence, but even those words, we have denotations, which is the dictionary definition, and we have connotation, which is sometimes words have a kind of a metaphoric or aspect. And then we have abstract terms. And this is certainly the experience in the spiritual, scriptural realm. And two words that Guruji has said are the most misunderstood. One is God and one is love. So what is this love? So I found in this beautiful book here, Divine Quest. This is a series of transcriptions of question and answer that Gurudev gave. He speaks on exactly that. So I'm going to be reading his words. Now, this is real scripture. This is the words of a highly, highly realized master, our master. So as I'm saying these words, try to feel his presence in these words. The question is, what is love? And this is Gurudev's response. Love is a feeling. When you see a flower, you get a feeling within. When a bee sees a beautiful flower, it also has a feeling within. This feeling is created within a person, in his heart or mind. When looking at an external object, looking at a friend, hearing a very beautiful sound or devotional song, feelings of love, joy, completeness, or satisfaction are created. But these feelings are dependent. You hear beautiful music, you feel love and joy, but real love is to perceive divinity within, independent of any external factor. That love, which is called devotion or pure love, is only experienced through channeling or directing your emotion toward God. Emotion that is transformed in God consciousness becomes devotion. Love which you feel seeing your wife or husband, your children or friend, becomes more physical or worldly. But it can become more spiritual when you feel the power of God in a person. In your little baby, you see the power of God. You see how the power of God is breathing. You observe the breath of your child as well as your own breath. You feel oneness. We are breathing the same air, and that same power of God that is in me is in my child. That love brings more devotion, more gratefulness to God. This is pure love. Through worldly love or love of your relations, you can develop spiritually. This is what love is. Jesus said, God is love. When you have love, you forget everything and you merge in God consciousness. So this is a practice, an instruction from our master. The next follow-up question is very appropriate. The question is, how do I develop love in my daily life? Gurudev's answer is, first, love your breath. Where there is love, there is attraction to love, closeness to love. When I say love your breath, I mean be attracted to breath. Be closer to it. Go to the source of your breath. Why do I emphasize breath? In the Bible it says, God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and truth. The worshiper of God should worship him in spirit, and spirit means breath. God is breath, and the worshiper of God should worship in breath. In the Taittiriya Upanishad it says, Namo Brahmane, Namaste Vayu, Twameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi, O Brahman, I bow to you. You are breath. You are directly perceived Brahman. The yogic scriptures say, breath is Brahma, the creator of life. Breath is Vishnu, the sustainer of life. Breath is Maheshwaraha, the form of death. With breath, you are born. With breath, you will die. With breath, you live. Breath is God. If you love your breath, that means you watch it. You see who is inhaling from within, and you understand that if there is no breath, there is no life. There is nothing for you. Even the body, which you love so much, you cannot claim, you cannot hold, if there is no breath. If there is no breath, there is no body, and you have no world, you have no mind, you have no ego, you have nothing. All play in the world, all achievement, all relationships are possible because of breath. If you really love your breath, pay attention to it, and you will realize how beautiful breath is, how breath is in every living being. Even plants breathe. Life manifests through breath, so your love will be greater. I also tell those who practice Kriya Yoga that love flourishes and the bond between friends becomes stronger. Mutual understanding is enhanced through the practice of Kriya Yoga. Kriya brings real love from within. The definition of divine love given by sage Sandila is, real love is when you constantly are united with God. Kriya Yoga teaches that love. The final thing I want to conclude with this is Gurudev talking about meditation. Many people sit to meditate as a duty. I have promised to meditate, so I will meditate. Mechanical meditation with the attitude, I should try, is good. But if you practice this technique with love, example, saying, I am not sitting on the floor, I am sitting in the lap of God. It is not my body, it is the temple of God. It is not my breath, it is the breath of God. Then God is not far away. God is within you, and to maintain this type of loving attitude, you not only bend your body and bow, you bow at the feet of God. Omnipresent God is observing you. In bending, you bring humbleness into your life. When you develop this type of attitude and practice, you feel more impetus, more inner transformation, more strength within. Real joy and real love flourish in you. This is why I tell you to practice with love. When you practice with love, this is what you experience. This is a beautiful time. God has given it to me, so I will use it just for me and God. Meditation becomes more intensified, and you get real transformation within, more joy and more love. So it couldn't be more clear. To take it a step, how do we do this? What is the impetus? Again, quoting Gurudev. This is from the introduction to Kriya Yoga. This, in a way, almost sums up so much of the essence of Gurudev's teaching. Those of us that had the privilege of being with Gurudev would remember just how constantly he would return back to this idea. And this is the idea of practice. Gurudev writes, we are born for self-realization, to experience this God consciousness within us. Think of God constantly, no matter what you are doing. Practice makes man perfect. An ounce of practice is worth a ton of theories. Gurudev came back to this time and time again. Theory will take a devotee outside, while practice will take him or her inside. Theory will make an individual restless and selfish. Practice will give him or her inner peace and liberation from ego. Gurudev stresses, practice, 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 in order to feel the presence of God in every breath, in every sound you hear, in everything you see. in every thought that comes to your mind, and even in the breathless state. Feel the presence of God as much in your enemy as in your friend. Remain firmly anchored in the divine omnipresent, divine omniscient, the divine omnipotent, even when you are occupied in worldly activities. Gurudev said, to love the breath is to love God, and to love God in every breath is a form of continuous prayer. Living a life of breath consciousness is the true spirit of religion and the practical way to love God. When Gurudev came to the West, he was asked, at this point, when he came in 76 to the United States, but 74 he left India. He was asked, monks were pretty rare, from India were pretty rare at that time. And Gurudev would be asked, what is your religion? And Gurudev's religion was, my religion is the religion of breath. Think how practical, how profound, how pragmatic. This is so much the essence of when I looked at Gurudev, how everything was so practical, so intelligent, so profound, so beautiful. And the one thing he would do constantly at the end was hit himself at the top of the head. One of my first communications with Guruji was at a program in Miami. It was in 98. And he looked at me, and I was just happened to be with him something. And he went like this. And I sort of got it. What he was telling me was, obviously, keep the mouth closed. Probably keep the tongue up to listen to the divine inner sound and watch the breath. Lahiri Mahasaya, I've read this nice book of his, says the secret of Kriya is in the Om and the Kriya Pranayama. So, something for us to take. Watch the breath. Listen to the divine sound and just keep coming back to it. Another very beautiful teaching I had with Gurudev was one night we were sitting out in the porch behind the house in Miami, and we were just sitting. There were a group of us sitting around Gurudev, and we were sitting in silence. And out of the blue, Gurudev's, after we'd been sitting 10 or 15 minutes in silence, Gurudev said, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And I remember at the time thinking, well, I've heard that before. That's, I don't know. I had an expectation. I had an expectation that there would be some profound nugget of wisdom that would somehow turn on the light and really show the way. Well, as it turns out, it probably was. Because the truth is, we do fail constantly. And Gurudev knows it. This is the human condition. This is the nature of our mind, is to pull us away from that divinity. Gurudev has written that we have two forces, centripetal and centrifugal. I forget which one's which, but the bottom line is one force is taking us out through the senses, drawing us into the world, and the other force is pulling us back to our divinity. And this is really the struggle, the battle of life, that we are trying to pull ourselves back up, which is why Gurudev would keep slamming the head. And by watching the breath pulls us into the present and basically holds the mind like a leash. As Gurudev, we've all heard, mind controls the senses and breath controls the mind. Breath control is self-control, breath mastery is self-mastery. So we need to practice. First and foremost, we need to practice. This is abhyasa. In the Bhagavad Gita, it talks about the need for abhyasa, for practice. In Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, it talks about abhyasa, the need for practice. And this practice in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra says we have to practice sincerely. We have to practice with love, not mechanically, in order to bring forth this crop of divinity to manifest love. It only makes sense that we need to practice with love. And we need to do it consistently for a good period of time. Guruji has written in some of my books that I had him sign, again, quoting Gurudev, practice, practice, practice. There is no other way. And this practice, we have to remember the masters talk about joy. There's sattvic joy, there's rajasic joy, and there's tamasic joy. Nice thing to reflect on. Sattvic joy is that joy often that requires sacrifice in some way. We may not be too attracted to it at the beginning, but later we are glad we did it and we enjoy the fruit of that action that came with sacrifice. And nothing is more that we find this is that with our spiritual practice. Because as we all know, there's times when we just don't feel like it. So what do? And this is the play of the mind. Guruji has often said that the mind is a playful trickster. The mind is a treacherous friend. With meditation, we are trying to take control of the mind. The mind is as the masters have said, is a good servant, but a lousy master. And the truth is, to a large degree, we are slaves of our own mind. And through meditation and spiritual practice, we are trying to take back control. And the mind often is not cooperative. So it takes effort. So it's just a little tip that I've had some success with that might be helpful to others is, so I may have a relationship with music and musicians, and a wisdom that comes from that world is that musicians know that in order to sustain their skill and to grow in their skill, they have to practice. And they say a wisdom is sometimes the hardest thing about practice is getting the instrument out of the case, because there's resistance to whatever it is. So similarly, there can be resistance to meditation. And we think, oh, well, let me just do this, let me just do that, whatever it is. So what I found is that I would just sort of, in a way to sort of make a deal with the mind, I just say, okay, I know you don't want to practice that long, but why don't we just go sit down and bow and say a prayer? And the mind will generally sort of go, oh, okay, a good idea. That's not so much. I'll go along with that. Then you go in, you sit down, and as soon as you start to sit, particularly if you have developed an area in your home where you are meditating, then all of a sudden you will start to feel that joy of meditation. And before you know it, you're back in and meditating. Speaking to that, Guruji says that, this is very beautiful, from the River of Compassion. Guruji wrote that meditation sets up an electromagnetic field that attracts the blessings of the realized ones. So this field that is being generated is going to be in this area where we meditate. Guruji has also said that we also, to a degree, are energizing or spiritualizing our own cushion. And he has written that we shouldn't share our cushion. Something to think about. But by creating that space, when we come to that space, it will create a motivation that can help us to get over that resistance. Then again, if you found you've fallen off the path, if you don't succeed, try again. All we can do is come back to the practice. Rajasic joy is that joy usually kind of associated with instant gratification. We get the idea, an impulse, I should do this. We do it, and not all the time, but often we can regret doing it. This, the masters have taught us Rajasic joy. Tamasic joy is that joy we're going in, I really shouldn't do this, but we do. And then after we do, we feel bad for doing it. So it's just a lose-lose all the way across. So we need to be aware of this. So I've gone on a little more than I'd liked here. So in the interest of time, I want to share 5 practices that were kind of the foundational teachings from Sri Yukteswar in how we should live our lives as spiritual seekers. Spiritual seekers, Guruji has written that a spiritual person's first goal is this liberation. Liberation from what? And when I kind of reflect on it, it's really liberation from bondage. And the 3 really important things we need to develop that I see in these pivotal principle scriptures are, we need practice. Then we need to, from Tattva Bodha, talks about we need to develop these fourfold qualifications of a spiritual seeker. And the first of that is viveka, discrimination. And we start to need to analyze our mind more and start to discriminate. The masters say we should discriminate between the self and the non-self. We need to discriminate between what is good and what is pleasant. That's an easy one, sort of. Is that, okay, so we know what we should do and we know what we'd rather do. It's that pull of, again, I know I should meditate, but I'd really rather do something else, make a phone call, watch TV, whatever it is, okay? So we need to discriminate between those 2 dynamics of the mind. We need to discriminate between the eternal and the temporary. So for the first, this discrimination between the self and non-self, there's a very simple kind of practice. Everything that I say is mine is not me. And to begin to reflect on that. So we begin to reflect on what we've been taught, that the mind and body are instruments that we've been given, but they are not who we are. And Guruji has talked about a really beautiful practice is to start to practice separating ourselves from our mind and body. So an example is, so when there's hungry, when we say, I am hungry, we are identifying with the body. He's suggesting we think, I am, and there is hunger, or to think, the body is hungry. It's a way to start to separate rather than to be so absorbed and identified with the body. So that's at a physical level. At a mental level, we can say, rather than I am sad, I am happy. Again, once again, I am I am, and my mind is happy. My mind is sad. My mind is tired. My mind is whatever it is. Again, to start to develop a relationship, separating them. This is, I think, I understand this neti, not this, not that. I am not this, I am not this. And by basically focusing what we are not, we can start to begin to get a sense of who I am. This idea of the good and the pleasant, we need to focus on. And this discrimination between the eternal and the temporary. And again, realizing that every form, everything that we can experience with the senses is temporary. And all things must pass. And again, to just be aware of this law of impermanence. And what this will start to do is to help develop the second qualification. And this is vairagya, dispassion, detachment. Guruji says the literal meaning is dispassion, but detachment is more of a broader concept. And this is really a nice thing to reflect on, because to detach means to first be aware of what we are attached to. And let's see, I think I may have written this down here. Important. When a person is attached with emotion, anger, fear, and habits, that rope of attachment is tied to the world of birth and death. And it also brings a tremendous amount of misery in our life, this attachment to things. If we can reflect sometimes, like say when we're angry, for example, or we're anxious, start to reflect on, well, what is it that I want here so badly that's creating all this anger that I'm so frustrated about? And often what we'll see is we're attached to something. And sometimes just by realizing that, we can detach from it and realize, this thing is creating way more anxiety than I need to deal with. So this practice, start to look. Guruji says we should make a list. Look at things of what we're attached to and how much we're attached to. And also look at how much suffering that can create for us, because all these things are temporary. They are relatively real, but they are not absolutely real, and they will pass. So again, this viveka is to use discrimination, this is an attribute of the intellect, not of the mind, the lower mind, and we should cultivate it more. And then cultivate it to develop more detachment, and with detachment really comes more freedom, more simplicity, less complication, less anxiety, less fear, more inner peace. And then we want to cultivate these sixfold treasures. The Buddha, this idea of detachment, the Buddha says, the first noble truth is life is suffering, and living is inherent in living in the material world is suffering. And the cause of suffering, he says, is attachment, craving, and desire. And the more that we can detach, the more we can bring more peace, calmness, and joy into our life, which is what we are all striving for. So, the sixfold treasures we want to develop, to cultivate. The first is shama, control of the mind. Okay, and we can do this with working with the breath, watching the mind, doing what we can to understand the mind and slowly to take control. I like to think, try and keep the mind peaceful, positive, and proactive. By watching the breath, we watch the mind and begin to develop a relationship that we are not the mind. Guruji says the mind is a playful troublemaker. He also says the mind can be a treacherous friend. And how many of us have done things impulsively that we really wish we had later we hadn't? And this can be our own mind. We can really self-sabotage, and this we is this mind, and we are not the mind. So we can learn. And it's important, Guruji says, you don't stifle the mind. You need to train the mind with care and understanding. So, and it's a practice. Dhamma is the second one. Control over the senses. Means to control our vision, hearing, speech, and food habits. Do everything in moderation, in conjunction with a discipline and proper attitude. A good place there is to start with controlling the tongue. Controlling our intake of food, controlling our speech. Okay, tongue is very dangerous. It's an organ of action, of speech, and an organ of perception, of taste. So to work with the tongue can be very beneficial. The next, uparama, is the strict observation of one's duty. God has brought us into the world and put us in a certain situation and context with responsibilities to others. And uparama is something we should take seriously. Guruji writes, we are to be conscious of our duties and responsibilities, and we should try to fulfill and accomplish them. He said, and we should perform our duties in God consciousness. To take it to a step, you could even say, I am doing my duty, but I am doing my duty not just to my son or my wife or my daughter, my children, whomever. I'm doing it as an offering to God. Again, taking it to that higher level. Number 4, titiksha, the endurance of heat and cold, pleasure and pain, forbearance. We are always in the clutch of the duality of nature, of the material world. Adi Shankaracharya, Guruji quotes, has written, the endurance of all suffering without trying to eliminate or to avoid, and not lamenting or blaming anyone for such a state, is known as forbearance. Guruji says, that which cannot be changed needs to be accepted. And Guruji always says, accept with joy and move forward. Not always easy, but this is the practice, and this is what we are trying to cultivate, because ultimately the masters say we want to create inner balance. The next, number 5, Shraddha. Shraddha is faith in the words of the Guru, and in the scriptures is Shraddha. Number 6, Samadhana. It is single-pointedness of mind, the ability to concentrate for a higher goal. If our mind is too restless, it's going to be very difficult to try and bring it to calmness, that we can start to cultivate and feel that inner peace, that inner joy, to experience our own divinity within. And lastly, the 4th qualification is mumukshutvam, deep desire for moksha, for liberation. Moksha, freedom from miseries and attainment of supreme bliss. So, these are the qualities of the disciple that we want to cultivate. Again, just to review, these are Viveka. Okay, this is all based on abhyasa, practice. Everything, as Guruji says, needs to be practiced. What are we practicing? Discrimination, dispassion, non-attachment, the 6-fold treasures, control of the mind, control of the senses, doing our duty responsibly in God consciousness, enduring, forbearing all the dualities of the material world that we know are going to come, having faith in these teachings of the scriptures and of our masters, and the ability to bring the mind to concentration, to single-pointedness. And lastly, is to cultivate the desire. How much do we want this? How much are we prepared to sacrifice towards that goal? Gurudev often said it was desire. Everything is based on our desire. So to conclude my talk, I'd like to share these 5 principal practices as suggested by Sri Yukteswar. Guruji has said, all disciples, students, and seekers should follow their master. The life and teachings of the master should mold and modify seekers' lives. The following 5 points highlight Sri Yukteswar's lifestyle, which all spiritual seekers should practice in their daily life. And what are the 5? The first is self-control. One should strive to control one's life. We tend to be passionate and attached. Through self-control, we can become compassionately detached. And breath control is the easy means towards self-control. Number 2, steady in spiritual practice. Regularity and sincerity in spiritual practice are essential. Slow and steady wins the race. Spiritual experience is not a matter of dreaming. To reap such divine harvest is the result of regular and sincere effort. Number 3, spiritual deep insight or self-study. In spiritual life, one should daily study the Holy Scriptures and spend time meditating on their universal truth. Scriptures should be read with devotion, love, and concentration. Only then is one able to understand the inner meaning hidden in the text. Number 4, self-surrender. Mentally, one should surrender to God and gurus in every breath. One should surrender oneself to God, who is life and breath. One should surrender wholeheartedly, not just with words. And lastly, number 5, strict in discipline. A spiritual life is a life of self-discipline. Self-discipline is a self-imposed, well-regulated lifestyle applicable to the way we eat, talk, sleep, and all other activities. It is important to discipline oneself with love and understanding, and be careful to avoid extremes. A true disciple is the disciplined one who is ready to discipline his mind or her mind, senses, and lifestyle. So with this, let us have a short general meditation where the focus of our meditation is going to be on our breath, primarily, those of us initiated and practicing. We'll also tune into the divine energy that we have awakened and cultivated through the grace of our masters. Those of us that are not initiated can gain tremendous benefit just by keeping our concentration in the soul center and beginning our relationship with breath, realizing just the profundity that is the breath. So let us begin. Please close the eyes. Sitting with the spine straight, with concentration either in the soul center or fontanelle. Just calmly watch. In every inhalation and exhalation, love God. Feel that love within. Love the breath. Please inhale long, slow, deep. Hold and bow. Exhale. Bow with surrender. Bow with love. Let us offer our hearts at the feet of God and the Master. Asking the Masters for their blessing to give us motivation, concentration, quieting our restless minds, opening our hearts. Feeling that presence of divinity at the top of the head or in the soul center. Please inhale long, slow, deep. Hold and slowly sit up. Exhale. Normal conscious breathing. Keep the spine straight. The concentration in the soul center or fontanelle. Let us take a few long, slow, deep inhalations. With the idea that we are inhaling love, the presence of God manifesting in the breath, and exhaling peace as the mind settles into calmness. Please inhale love, long, slow, deep. Hold. Exhale peace. Hold. Inhale love. Exhale peace. Inhale love. Hold. Exhale peace. Inhale love. Hold. Exhale peace. Hold. Inhale love. Hold. Exhale peace. Let us now try and maintain a state of unobstructed awareness. If thoughts arise, just simply witness them and allow them to dissolve back into their source. Meditation in silence. Thank you. To conclude, I'd like to share a little paragram here. I don't know, this is you can get from Self-Realization Fellowship. These are a beautiful little collection of little teachings of Yogananda. So what I try and do is I take them and I Try and feel his presence, and then with the idea that perhaps he will guide me to whichever one I will choose. And interestingly enough, our choice today that came up was on joy. Nice way to close since we began with joyful, joyful. Master writes, even if life gave you at one time everything you wanted, wealth, power, friends, after a while, you would again become dissatisfied and need something more. But there is one thing that can never become stale to you, joy itself. Happiness that is delightfully varied, though its essence is changeless, is the inner experience that everyone is seeking. Lasting, ever-new joy is God. Finding this joy within, you will find it in everything without. In God, you will tap the reservoir of perennial, unending joy. Joyful, joyful, we adore thee, God of glory, Lord of love. Hearts unfold like flowers before thee, opening to the sun above. Melt the clouds of sin and sadness, drive the dark of doubt away. Giver of immortal gladness, fill us with the light of day. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pasyantu, Ma Kaschid Bhukabhag Bhavet. Om Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi. Thank you. God bless us all. As Gurudev said, love, love, love. More love, most love. Thank you, thank you, thank you.